Most zombie games want you to believe it's firearms and good old-fashioned human ingenuity that will save us. State of Decay is the one game that'll stand up, look you in the eye, kiss you on the mouth, and tell you the truth. Guns don't kill zombies. Steel body pickup trucks kill zombies. State of Decay clawed up in June 2013, the debut title by Undead Labs. It was a Microsoft exclusive, dropping initially as a digital-only Xbox Live arcade title for the 360 and Windows Live platforms. I distinctly remember buying this game on the 360 and being really pleasantly surprised by the quality, since a lot of digital-only releases at the time were basically just Flash games. It spawned a sequel in 2018, State of Decay 2, which was surprisingly well supported up until earlier this year. The third game of the franchise was announced and is due at an indeterminate time. 2013 was a weird year to release a zombie game like this. The same year The Last of Us showed up and decided to add emotion and drama to zombies. And really right at the tail end of the huge early 2000s zombie boom, when we were getting games like Left 4 Dead, Dead Rising, movies like Shaun of the Dead, and even releasing after Dead Island, which I personally consider to be the game that broke the Shamblers' back, if only because of the regrettable merch. Don't get me wrong, there are still zombie games aplenty, but it's easy to forget just how prevalent zombies were in the media of the early 2000s. These games gradually transformed from horde-killing spectacles that justified dumb enemy AI into more of a setting, and State of Decay feels like a weird transition between these outlooks. It doesn't focus quite so much on combat as those other earlier games, and it's not a very strong narrative or resonant emotional story either, sitting somewhere between a community management simulator and a survival scavenging game. Combat is definitely a big part of the game, but discretion is the better part of valor here. It has a surprising amount of overlapping systems and a few mechanical and gameplay elements that I consider to be all-timers. And really I'm reviewing this game today because I think of it and its sequel as the definitive zombie game experience. Easier to get into and master than a more intense simulation like Project Zomboid, but still providing that intentional sandbox experience that lets you live with your own choices and build a story brick by brick. I should mention that I was playing the original State of Decay for this video. I know there's the Year 1 Survival Edition, which has a few extra missions, bug fixes, and weapons, but that's not the one I had installed. I also mostly played this on the second highest graphics preset. There's some weird pop-in and shading jitters on the highest one. Anyways, let's dig in.
What the hell was that?
Dunno.
That didn't look like any disease I've ever seen. You?
Nope.
Maybe we ought to go, huh?
The base game starts with two friends on a camping trip, and we step into our first character, Marcus Campbell. He might even end up as your only character. We're eased through a tutorial. Combat is fairly simple. We attack, push, or dodge, and there's a stamina-consuming stance button that lets us sprint, heavy attack, or execute down zombies. The combat is a mix of stamina management and dodge rhythm. It's simple enough to become almost second nature, which lets you focus on the bigger picture. And we've also got shooting, albeit with limited ammo, headshots only, and some noise concerns. There's a lot of systems at play in the minute-to-minute. We've got stealth. These zombies are more listeners than lookers. Characters are louder when hauling more gear or carrying a duffel bag of resources. And when you scavenge, you can go slow and somewhat quietly, or louder, fast, but with a risk of breaking something and drawing a horde to you. Inventory management is also kept intentionally constrained. You can only carry a handful of unique items at a time, and becoming encumbered drastically worsens your stamina usage, combined with drawing more zombies in. It can be a surprisingly deadly choice to simply pick up an extra gun. Speaking of, there's a huge variety of weapons. They aren't very specifically differentiated. Some calibers are quieter, there's magazine differences and so on, but there's really just a shocking variety. you can still find new weapons 40 hours in. The longer you play as a character, the lower their max stamina becomes. Likewise, if you get downed by a zombie but avoid being eaten, your health bar shrinks until the character can rest. The game is actually utilizing your system's clock to run simulations while closed, so if your character gets tired, log off. You'll be fine tomorrow, although your base will use up some resources. And we have usage-leveled skills for each character. Each skill provides passive bonuses, and certain skills unlock special attacks or extra abilities. The characters mostly have the same general skill set, plus some gag skills. But there are two, Powerhouse and Reflexes, which only a few characters have and allow unique animations, attacks, just make them overall better. There's a vast difference between an untrained survivor and a hardened vet, and it does make those losses hurt a little worse. These ground level mechanics funnel into the larger experience. State of Decay is not really about any individual character, it's about the survival of a community. After the tutorial, we find a group of survivors and realize our role wasn't really Marcus. We can freely switch to multiple characters. If Marcus dies on a run gone bad, tough luck, you're some other schmuck now, and there's still scavenging to be done. I really like this approach in gaming, that living with death belief, where the story continues regardless of what happens to any given character. That none of these guys are irreplaceable heroes, they can all be trained up to greatness and just as easily be lost. And it allows for more meaningful narratives than a simple save-load system, which constantly butchers the events of your story. When Marcus finally dies and you have to switch to someone else, you feel that difference in the loss of your accumulated skills. And suddenly there was meaning in that loss. But you persist. The only real problem with this philosophy is that Marcus actually does have great stats, and if you're playing decent, he just might not ever die. At the larger scale, we're a mobile community of scavengers. When we move into a base, we explore our surroundings, either through a classic Xbox 360 tower survey, or just drive around, noting where hordes are, infestations, and picking out likely sources for our major survival needs: food, medicine, ammo, gas, and construction materials. Then we set out, rifling through drawers until we find a stash of goods, which we throw in a rucksack and carry back to our home base one at a time. The third DLC also added the ability to throw up to 6 rucksacks in the trunk of a car, which they then backfilled into the base game, and which drastically reduces some of the tedium the game had at launch. Although it does speed the pace a little since we can combine multiple scavenging runs, ultimately it feels like a better place than release though. Once we've picked a place clean, or really once we get bored of a place, or the overarching narrative demands it, we can move to another home location on the map and start over. It's a simple and surprisingly addictive loop. Managing the home base involves constructing and upgrading facilities, outreach with other groups of survivors, and dealing with unexpected disasters. No element of this game is strikingly deep, but all of these shallow systems tend to come together in engaging ways. The story is likewise somewhat sparse, given that it can only really manage a handful of meaningful character moments in the beginning when you have set characters. Once your group is built up of random guys, and some survivors have stopped surviving, you tend to get more generic quests, akin to a Bethesda Radiant quest. Go here, kill this enemy, find a random item, take this guy on a walk, etc. There's a few distinct quest lines you can run through, showing a judge forming a police state or a family of rednecks becoming a group of serious outlaws. And it sure feels like the game is teasing human combat at times, but we never really get there. All of the plot lines seem to randomly drop off or have the aggressors just get eaten by zombies. It's not super fulfilling. We also don't actually get many leads on the source of the zombie apocalypse, which personally I think makes sense. It doesn't really matter who's to blame, we're just a bunch of survivors. Unraveling a plot isn't nearly as important to us as just getting out of town. Although I will say, there's a suspicious amount of Cthulhu art in this small town. Early on, it's all shamblers, and we're introduced to a few varieties of freak zombies that are not at all just taken from Left 4 Dead, including the bloater, Juggernaut, Feral, Armored, and Screamer zombies. These all have special abilities that can drastically alter the flow of your scavenging run. However, they don't really spawn enough in the base game. You're mostly just dealing with the slower zombies. When the fates collide and a horde spawns in with a few freaks, that's probably when you'll lose a guy. They do ramp up as the game progresses, but even at the end of my run, it was pretty rare to feel threatened. And the cars. The driving feels most similar to Saints Row, but a little worse in my opinion. Every vehicle in this game feels like it's topping off at 30, but handles like it's going 100. A small bump can completely flip you. Sometimes gravity just seems to switch off. But on the other hand, you can press X to swing open your car door and just absolutely joust a guy. The door is also tougher than the actual car. Head-on with about a dozen zombies tends to seriously wreck your tires, but the door just keeps trucking. And ultimately, don't worry, there's a ton of abandoned, fully functional cars on every corner. It feels like this game was intended to have a fuel mechanic and it just got scrapped. As is, you can still collect fuel as a resource, but it's almost useless except for making Molotovs, and you'll probably end up with way more than your storage cap. So, overall, the base game provides a really enjoyable, somewhat guided survival sandbox experience, with that nice, constant feedback loop of gathering items and putting them to use improving your base. There's a nice strip of progression and those early game aha moments when you find a gun that seems better than normal. By the end of the campaign, it still didn't really feel stale yet, which is surprising because I've played through this game 3 or 4 times in my life. However, Breakdown, the first DLC, is where things get repetitive. Breakdown is essentially the main game, but with the story elements stripped out, a retooling into a more true sandbox. It plays the same in-game, but with a meta layer added in. We're introduced to the hero system. Complete certain objectives in the sandbox, like hitting 500 zombies with a car door, and you unlock a unique hero with preset gear and stats to join your community. There's also a progression system tied up in an RV. Your only real goal is to survive long enough to find and fix the RV, then you load up with your 5 favorite characters and reset the map at a slightly higher difficulty. Unfortunately, it's just the one map over and over. The difficulty adjustments start to feel pretty good around the 4th or 5th iteration. Items are less common, there's more zombies, and a reasonable amount of freaks spawn. I played up through level 6, at which point it just felt a little too tedious for me, and I moved on. It's not bad, but it feels long, especially when you're fresh off the main campaign. The second DLC, Lifeline, switches the focus from scavenging and survival to more of a story-driven shooter experience. We play as a group of soldiers holed up in a strip mine outside Danforth, a major US city. The main army is pulled out, but we're given orders to hold tight and extract a few VIPs, including a string of scientists and their assistants with a potential cure, and someone from the Human Future Fund, which may have accidentally caused the outbreak. Since we're the military, we only have one base, no more relocating, and we can radio in supply drops instead of spending all our time scavenging. This mode also gives us a boatload of usable ammo, higher-end weapons, activatable abilities, and introduces mechanics that become fully fleshed out only in the sequel, including the siege elements where massive waves of zombies descend on our base, and the idea of high danger zones where the horde is actually unending. They're both a little undercooked here compared to 2, but it is neat to directly trace the through line. The siege mechanic in particular feels like it's begging for some kind of tower defense mechanics, upgrading your wall or positioning soldiers or watchtowers or something, but it just doesn't exist beyond planting mines, and it makes these sections feel much less interactive than you would expect. Part of that is also down to the AI being a bit wonky. It also gives us the military pickup. The entire Danforth map is connected by a series of highways and off-ramps with limited through travel between those areas. So we reach out and pull free the Excalibur of pick-em-ups. You can effortlessly mow down horde after horde in these bad boys, and they handle a little better than the normal ones too. The highway system is actually kept surprisingly interesting. There's loads of static obstacles, ramps, and little detours that keep navigation from just being highway driving. This was also where I had a sort of eureka moment. The weird handling of the cars is actually vital to the fun in this game. Some of the most intense moments happen when you're cruising along, hit a little edge, flip, and you go from Mad Max to Mild Mel, sneaking along with a haul of construction materials clanking away in your backpack, hoping you don't draw the attention of that juggernaut. Survival horror can really thrive on that sudden reversal of power. The trickle of zombies becoming an unstoppable flood, the gun jamming or crowbar breaking right as that feral howls. So yeah, maybe cars handling like slick shit fits right into that bag of tricks. Lifeline's a bit harder than the base game, but it's not quite a matter of true difficulty. The friendly AI is capable of taking way fewer hits, but they do shoot a little more, sometimes. It's really the weak point of the game mode. Maybe just the weak point of the game. I lost a lot of friendly soldiers because they would forget to shoot and get swarmed during a siege. I also lost a handful of missions because the friendly would already be dead by the time I got there. There is a bit more danger by virtue of the setting. There's simply way more zombies since we're in a city. The constant pressure and the better ammo supply does make the game feel more consistently action-packed, and the limited inventory space keeps it tense. It's much easier to suddenly get in over your head in this mode. But a lot of my failures did feel like outright bugs, like the engine wasn't able to accurately register all the zombies on screen in some way. Overall, I do like the base game and Lifeline. Breakdown was a little much since it's basically the same thing over and over, but even then it didn't feel bad. If I hadn't started it immediately after playing through the main campaign, it probably wouldn't have felt so much like running through the motions. On the trusty pain scale, I'd give State of Decay a slightly painful. Even after all these years, it feels like a definitive zombie scavenging experience. I found it engaging for about 50 hours. Mopping up the last few achievements was a bit tedious, but I've done much worse. If you're looking for an arcadey survival game with a rewarding scavenging loop that doesn't try to drown you in a bloated crafting system, well, this is still a top choice. Or if you want a zombie game with a decent sense of humor that isn't too wacky and focuses more on the community aspect, well, it's also a top choice. I think ultimately the sequel provides a more polished experience, and most importantly, a greater variety of maps. But State of Decay really held up a lot better than I expected. Well, that's all for my 46th review. I'm Jotun Warrior. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, see ya.